Nice.
I don't know where that lid went, but we're going to need it.
You're listening to The Tales We Tell, a podcast about spooky stories, unsolved mysteries, and local lore. I'm your host, Hannah Parch.
And I'm Katie.
Welcome back!
I'm just glad that we're both healthy again.
I know! Oh my gosh. I got my voice back. You have your health back.
Yep. It was. I think I just caught it early enough that I was able to nip it in the bud really, really quickly. Yeah, I started Tuesday with a headache that I was mostly able to just power through all day.
Yeah.
But by like 6 o'clock, it was excruciating. I was dealing with the kid.
Yeah.
And I stood up. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go give him a bath. Stood up, almost immediately fell back over. And I was like, he's not getting a bath. Like, I can't trust myself to really pick him up more than to just put him in the crib.
Yeah.
And then by Wednesday morning, I had a fever. Or no, by Wednesday morning, I was feeling better.
Right.
Wednesday afternoon, the headache was back.
Ugh.
And then I had a fever. And I was like, I'm going to the doctor. Like, I have a fever. I'm going to the doctor right now.
Yeah, that's smart. I finally went to urgent care, I think Monday. We recorded on Sunday, right? Yeah. I went Monday because Sunday was the third night that I was woken up by my cough, my stupid lingering cough. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. So I just got those good prescription cough meds and cleared me up.
Yeah, they did the flu strep COVID, and my throat wasn't really bothering me. It was a little irritated. Then when she did the strep test, I was like, well, now it hurts.
Well, now it's bothering
and it
me.
got way worse after that. And so, like, Thursday, the fever was gone by the afternoon.
Oh, good.
And the headache was completely gone because she gave me some steroids. So I'm like, okay, look, if I don't have the headache and the fever, awesome. But basically, my thing then was sore throat and, like, wooziness. Like, I felt drunk. Like, I would turn my head or even just move my eyes and the world would spin.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could power through a headache. I could power through the sore throat. But this, like, weakness or wooziness doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Well, I was concerned because I texted you on Thursday and you were like, no, I'm big sick. And I was like, oh, no. But then I saw on Saturday your pictures of the aquarium, and I was like, oh, okay, she's probably feeling better.
I'm big, healthy.
I was like, okay, I think we're probably good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is great, because I have a horrible story to tell you. We're back with part 2. And I already warned Katie that this might be part 2 of 3. Because I was doing this, and I just, You
just kept digging?
I just kept going, and I was, like, going through, and I was like, wow, these notes are really long. So, yeah. And for the first time ever, I have an accompanying slideshow. Woohoo. Very exciting.
Taking a page out of my book.
I know. Well, it's mostly just to keep everything organized. I was going to give you a spreadsheet, but then I was like, oh, then you'll see all the information all at once. So this is a way for me to control it.
Gotcha.
So this is part 2 for anyone who did not listen 2 weeks ago to part 1 of The Butcher of Rostov. If you want to go back and listen to that, I mean, you should if you're going to listen to this one.
If you haven't already listened.
Yeah.
Sorry that we had a different episode in between.
Honestly, it was a palate cleanser. And I honestly should have told you to prepare palate cleansers for this one. Listeners, prepare your own palate cleansers. I would say maybe every 15 minutes or so, take a break, pet a dog, eat some ice cream. I don't know.
I have a cute palate cleanser story about dogs and babies.
Okay,
so just,
great.
Let me know when you want a cute little anecdote.
Great. Content warnings are the same as last time, except I'm not going to talk as much about the erectile dysfunction. I am going to talk about sexual abuse of children. I'm so sorry. And graphic violence. I promise I am going to try not to linger on it. Well, I'll tell you as we get there. Okay. So quick recap. All right. So our recap, Andrei Chikatilo is our butcher, if you will. He grew up in poverty with erectile dysfunction. He discovered at a young age that dominating and hurting people caused him sexual satisfaction, and that escalated pretty quickly to violent murder. And he has now convinced himself that brutally stabbing / causing pain to people is the only way that he can be sexually satisfied. He's also concluded that he has to be sexually satisfied, which is not something that you have to have. So he has killed 9 women and children, where we left off. The oldest of his victims at this point is 19. The youngest is 9.
And one of those he killed on Walker's birthday.
So we left off at the end of 1982. The police had formed a task force called Operation Forest Path. Terrible name. Mm-hmm. But they're not releasing information to the public because it would reflect poorly on the perfect, orderly facade that the Soviet Union is trying to project. Okay, so end of 1982 is where we're at. And I will go ahead and let you know, the way I'm going to proceed with this episode is going to be less from Andrei's point of view and more from the police's point of view.
All right, cool.
So the reason I gave you these 2 columns is because we're going to focus more on the
date that they're found.
The date that the victims are found. Mm-hmm. And I also am going to make my best effort at pronunciations. And I do just think it's really important to at least try to say all the names of the victims. So that's where we're at. Okay.
He's gotten better at hiding them as he went along.
Yeah.
I mean, the earliest were found within, a couple of days to a week or so. The last 3 were several months in between when they were killed and when they were found.
Yeah. And then he had one that was never found.
Yep.
Which is horrible.
Is that the one he threw in the river?
No. The very first one was the one he threw in the river.
Never mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then the very last one, she was killed in the winter. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of them will find if he kills them in the winter or in the colder months,
they get hidden by the snow.
Yeah. And so their bodies aren't found until it kind of thaws out.
But they're also kind of preserved.
Yeah. Which is, good for identification purposes. So police have a lot of theories rolling around in their noggins about who this killer is. And because nothing official is being printed, but the public is not stupid, and so they obviously know, people are being killed. Mm-hmm. So nothing official is being printed, but rumors are going around because they're well, no one's saying anything, so we got rumors. So one of the rumors, which, tell me if this sounds familiar, is that the wealthy elite were kidnapping children off the street to sell into sex trafficking.
Plausible.
Which I think that is QAnon. I think that's their theory of what Democrats are doing. Or, what Democrats are involved in.
Who knows?
I don't know.
I mean,
good to know.
Human trafficking is a real thing.
It is. And, Jeffrey Epstein, let us all know that the wealthy elite are doing that sometimes. So I guess I shouldn't scoff at that theory.
Well, I don't think poor people are, in any position to buy other people. So
that's true. That's true.
It's got to be
the wealthy ones. One of the police theories, satanic cult, obviously.
Satanic panic.
It is around the time that the satanic panic was starting to take hold of the West. Another police theory was that a group of murderers was looking to harvest organs, I guess for the black market. I don't really know.
But none of them were missing organs, right?
Not yet. The last one was Olga. Her uterus was missing, I think.
She's 10.
I know. Police's favorite theory is that a mentally ill individual, and by this I believe that they mean someone who has been institutionalized, or possibly someone with developmental disabilities. I think they may be using those terms interchangeably. And or homosexuals, and or pedophiles, again, using those kind of loosely and interchangeably.
Well, I mean, it is, the victimology is a little kind of spread out there. You know, the age ranges from 9 to 19.
Mm-hmm.
And it's both girls and boys.
Yeah, and I think we'll get to this later, but because Oleg, which everyone doesn't have this visual, but there's 2 male victims on this first one here. Oleg was the first one, which his body was never found, and then Sergei was a 15-year-old. I don't think that they have attributed his death to Andrei. So as of right now, I think that they are thinking it is only female victims. Why they think that, like, a homosexual man is responsible for this, I have no idea.
They just want to hate on homosexuals, so,
They do.
It's just it's a dirty word, and they want to throw it in there as a bad guy.
And at that time, in the Soviet Union, homosexuality was a crime.
Well, surely there's, like there's satanic panic, there's... I don't know, give me a minute and I'll think of something clever. I'm too irritated to be clever at the moment.
Yeah. Well, and unfortunately, this group of people, like people who have been institutionalized or like convicted homosexuals and convicted pedophiles, this is the only group that the police can actually like target. And so they spent a lot of time targeting them.
Yay.
Yeah, I know.
Waste of resources.
So when they went looking for suspects at psychiatric facilities or among men who had been convicted of homosexuality again, they coerced a ton of confessions from several young men, many of whom had intellectual disabilities, and 3 homosexual men that police singled out ended up committing suicide as a direct result of the allegations made against them. So, I'm sorry about that. Okay, we're going to move on to 1983.
Now we're breaking it down into years.
I know, I'm so sorry, and this is the heading I have to go with. All right,
There's a lot of empty space under that heading.
Uh-huh.
Bring it on.
Okay, the first activity that police know of or see in 1983, here we go, is on August 8th, when the body of 13-year-old Irina Dunyankova, her body was found, like I said, August 8th. She had Down syndrome, and she came from an extremely broken home, and unfortunately no one had reported her missing.
Jeez.
I know. And for a lot of these, there's a lot of time in between when bodies are found and when victims are actually identified, which obviously for time's sake we will not be getting into. 3 weeks later, on August 28th, the body of 7-year-old Igor Gutkov was found 2 miles from where Irina had been found. And this is Andrei's youngest victim, so we're not going to go any younger than this. And so, like I said before, it's unclear if police hadn't connected Andrei's first male victim to him, or his first 2, because now they're, like, thrown off. They're like, whoa, a boy. So now they're extremely confused, and they start to speculate that there are 2 separate killers. I don't know if you remember from last time. I don't actually remember if I mentioned last time, but he had started to mutilate the eyes of the bodies.
I don't think you did mention that. Or I don't remember it.
I think...
Or I intentionally blocked it out.
Okay. I think we talked about the idea or the folklore that...
We did. Yes. Okay, you did mention it because of... All right. See, I just forgotten / blocked it out.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, the idea that your last moments before death are basically captured like photographs in your eyes so that you could theoretically remove someone's eyeballs and essentially look through the lens and see their killer or their last moments before death.
Yes. So Andrei had been mutilating...
Not a thing.
Not a thing. He had been mutilating the eyes, which is kind of how police are like connecting all of these murders together. And so now they're like, oh, maybe there's 2 killers who are just both mutilating the eyes of their victims. Which I'm like, police, can you just get on it? And they could not wrap their minds around the fact that one killer would target both male and female victims. So, whatever. But just as police are beginning to, like, come up with this new theory, they got a surprising new development. In September of 1983, 19-year-old Yuri Kalinick confessed to all of the murders. So,
was he a voluntary, like, did he go in and say, hey, I've done all this, or was he coerced?
The second of the two. So Yuri was described as developmentally delayed, but today he may have been diagnosed just with a learning disability and a behavioral problem. He grew up in a group home, and although he was no longer living there because he's 19, he remained close friends with many of the young men who were still there. And in September, he was in Rostov for the day with his friend, I think we're pronouncing this, it looks like it's Valerie, but I'm going to say hold on, help me out. Valerie? I don't know. It's a male name. Valerie. Thank you. We're going to go with Valerie. So he's hanging out with his friend Valerie, and I think Valerie is either still living in the group home or is from the group home, but I think that's how they knew each other. So it's unclear if Valerie had a developmental disorder or disability or anyways. But they're friends. They're hanging out. So they, like, took a bus or a train to Rostov. They spent the night there, and they spent the night in an empty trolley bus. And the next morning, Valerie was just kind of goofing around, and the trolley bus driver caught him and got mad and called the police. And Valerie gets hauled in, and the police are questioning him. And because it's in the area, they say, hey, do you know anything about these murders? And Valerie kind of freaks out and is like, no, I didn't do them. Yuri did them. So Valerie kind of, like, points the finger at Yuri.
Way to throw him under the trolley bus.
That's a good one.
That's why you pay me the big bucks.
I know. I didn't even think of that one. I should have written that one down. So basically, Yuri is thrown under the proverbial trolley bus. He gets hauled in, and police essentially coerce a confession out of him.
Scare the bejesus out of him.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, not predictably, he confesses to, like, the known murders. Like, he's only confessing to the ones that, like, they know about, because those are the only ones that, like, he knows about. So, while Yuri is in custody, things are still happening, and another body turns up. And this one, unfortunately, is our first Jane Doe, because she wasn't able to be identified. She's between 18 and 25, and she had been killed sometime over the summer. And so police are like, okay, well, Yuri still could have done this, right? Because he was out in the summer. And then the body of 19-year-old Vera Shevkun, who had been killed just days before, shows up. And the violence directed towards both women was consistent with the serial killer. Regarding Vera's killing, this is a quote from one of the books that I read. Quote, he had tried to remove virtually all her female physical characteristics, which is a nice way of saying that he cut out all of her, like,
female anatomy.
Yeah. And those were not recovered. But with Vera, her eyes were not mutilated. Which Andrei is just, like, a chaotic, disorganized killer.
Maybe he, snuck up on her, strangled her, and she never saw him, so he didn't have to, mess with her eyes.
That would be actually a good theory.
Or maybe he was wearing a mask or a disguise or something. Basically, he didn't feel feel the need to mutilate her eyes because his weird she didn't logic. See him.
Yeah.
But clearly this means that our friend Yuri did not kill Vera.
Right. But he's still in custody.
Because there is some differences in victimology.
And because police are still like, maybe there's multiple murderers.
That's right.
Even though Yuri
maybe he's got a
told
partner.
us that there weren't. Yeah. And then on November 27th, the body of 22-year-old Valentina Chuchulina was discovered. Her left eye only had been mutilated. I guess maybe just her left eye was open. And the coroner determined that she had died in August, so investigators believed late enough that Yuri could still have killed her. But Yuri had not confessed to her murder. He hadn't also confessed to the Jane Doe murder. Because he's only confessing to murders that police knew about when they arrested him. So, whatever. 1984.
Yuri's still in custody?
Yuri's still in custody. He's just hanging out there. January 4th, the body of 14-year-old Sergei Markov was discovered. He had disappeared just after Christmas, and the coroner determined that he was likely killed on December 27th. So this was while Yuri was in custody. And even stranger, investigators found 3 large piles of human excrement near his body. And
gross.
I know. And I will just tell you, this is a little section. I have no idea what the fuck is going on in this part. So just kind of...
We'll go for a ride with you.
We'll just go, just hang out with me on the trolley bus. Okay, so in the course of investigating Sergei's death, police interviewed 23-year-old Mikhail Tyepkin and 17-year-old Alexander Ponomaryev. I practice these names. So both of these men, Mikhail and Alexander, are developmentally delayed, and they both confessed to killing Sergei together. Like, they were like, oh yeah, I was with Mikhail. I was with Alexander. And when police, when they're taking police to the crime scene, Alexander is even like, oh, where are the piles of poop that we left here? And police are like, oh, okay, so they probably were here. But they weren't. Like, just, spoiler alert, they didn't. Mikhail also confesses to killing Vera Shevkin, which is one of the murders that, remember, they got Yuri to confess to. While he's at it, Mikhail also says there's a psychiatrist that he would like to kill. And then he also says that he had killed another girl and dumped her body in a hole near a gas station. And when police look into that, they found a body. I have no idea who that person is. The book was just like, and that checked out. There's a body there.
I wonder if it's one of those, like, they found the body in the hole and was just like, let's keep going.
Like, no idea. No, I have no idea. They just gloss over this. Another thing that they gloss over, 2 more bodies turned up. No idea who they are. Not victims of Andrei, just 2 more unrelated dead bodies showing up in Russia.
Yeah, that's Russia for you, I guess. Especially in the 1980s.
Like,
well, shoot, that's probably Russia now, too.
I know, like, Alexander tells police, oh yeah, me and Mikhail, we killed those 2. That was us. But then also other suspects are turning up. One of them has one of the victims' jewelry on them. And, like, at this point, I'm like, okay, I can understand why the police are, like, kind of pulling their hair out. Because I don't know what's happening. This is very confusing.
Yeah, there are these 2 kids that are like, oh yeah, we killed these people, but also all these other people that are completely unrelated.
Yeah. And then, like, here's 3 bodies that are completely unrelated to this other list of bodies, but we also think that there's multiple people involved in these killings. It's incredibly confusing. So I think at this point they have Mikhail and Alexander also in custody with Sergei, or with Yuri. They're just like, we're just going to hold everyone just to be safe.
Y'all sit over here until we get all this sorted out.
Yeah.
Because this is a mess.
Yeah. They do eventually let Yuri go. I don't exactly know when that happens, but he does eventually get let go and, like, cleared of everything.
Yay, Yuri.
But while they're still investigating Sergei's death, they find semen on Sergei's body. So it's 1983. DNA analysis isn't a thing yet. But what they are able to determine from semen is blood type.
That's what I figured you were going to say.
Okay. Stay with me because we're still on the trolley bus. Okay. So they determine that the donor of this semen has type AB blood. Here's my science lesson. Correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not the scientist you are. So essentially, nearly everybody puts out blood type antigens in their bodily fluids, which is how forensics is able to determine blood type from a semen sample. Mm-hmm. But about 20% of the population is what's known as non-secretors, which means that they don't put out blood type antigens in their bodily fluids.
I didn't know that.
Andrei is one of these. So...
Well, must have been whoever left the piles of shit next to...
So, it's actually impossible to determine blood type of a non-secretor from a semen sample. So, the determination that the police had was wrong.
Awesome. A red herring.
Yes. So, and police hold on to this. This is, their golden piece of evidence. Mm-hmm. They're like, our killer has AB blood type. Andrei's blood type is actually type A. Positive or negative, I don't know. They don't think that's important for me to know. Okay. Moving on. On January 10th, the body of 17-year-old Natalia Shalpanina was discovered. She had been murdered just days before. Her eyes were not mutilated, but her left ring finger was cut off. A cheap gold ring was discovered, nearby, and a size 13 footprint was left behind. Police also found out that Natalia was good friends with Olga Kupra, who was Andrei's sixth victim, which, nice connection, but it doesn't really help them at all. On March 12th, 24-year-old Lyudmila Kushuba was discovered.
Wait, that says January 10th, 1984.
Okay, listen. This is not a perfect slideshow. There's a lot of things happening. Just ignore that. Pretend it says March 12th. March 12th.
All right.
And although her body at the time was too decomposed to identify, it was determined that she had been killed in the summer of 1983. She was eventually identified, and her eyes were also mutilated. So, again, chaotic. He's mutilating some eyes. He's not mutilating others. He's cutting off fingers. He's not making any sense. Let me see if I got the date right on this one. Okay. March 12th. Okay. No, March 24th. Good grief. My dates are wrong.
I bet the next one says March 24th. Well, that says March 21st or 24th was the day he was killed, but he was found on the 12th.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, just don't pay attention. Don't pay attention to those. I did a lot of copy and pasting and then just didn't correct things. Just listen to the words coming out of my mouth. Okay, March 24th, the parents of 10-year-old Dmitry Tashnikov called police to report their son missing. Now, Dmitry liked to collect stamps, and as it turns out, Andrei had found this out about him and lured him away by pretending to have a stamp collection to show him. Police found his body 3 days later after he was reported missing. So they found him on March 27th. His tongue and genitals had been removed. Another footprint was found at this scene. It was roughly the same size as the first one they found. And semen was also recovered. And again, forensics is AB blood type, which again is wrong. But they're at least consistently wrong. So they're at least saying it's the same person. So it's around this time in March of 1984 that Andrei's home and work life are kind of deteriorating. So work is beginning to notice that he is missing work a lot, and Feodosia is complaining because he's never home. She thinks he's always at work. Work thinks he's always at home. He's kind of neither.
He's always busy murdering people.
He's always busy murdering people. So he's like completely consumed right now with this like, quote, need to kill. Mm-hmm. And he's also really consumed with like the practicalities that are like coming along with it, like having to hide bodies and like trying to not get caught. And he eventually...
What do you do with all these mutilated body parts? And like, what about all the blood? It's a messy game.
And he's like cutting out parts, and it's like, Andrei, you're making this trouble yourself, man. Mm-hmm. Like, you could make it a lot easier if you just like weren't killing people. So he eventually loses his job, and he would obviously eventually get another job at a lower position for less pay. But all of this is like furthering his frustrations and furthering his like low self-esteem. And so the murders just kind of get more aggressive.
Yay. So, fun story. Today, you know how Walker has the little scooter push toy?
Uh-huh.
He's all over the house doing that. And he discovered it's fun to chase the dogs with it.
Oh, I bet they love that.
Oh, yeah. Jory was like his main target, too.
Aww.
So Jory would be laying down and Walker would be like, aha, Jory. And he'd push his little scooter over there and like bump into Jory, who would startle up and run off. And he'd just cackle and think it was hilarious. Just chasing the dogs.
I think it's hilarious how fast your child is on the floor.
So fast.
That's why when you sent me that picture of him, the little pizza cutter,
mm-hmm.
I immediately...
he was coming at me.
Well, I immediately thought of when we were at Connor and Bianca's, mm-hmm. and we were trying to get the boys to like walk, and they're like so slow and like unsteady, and then like Walker immediately like dropped down to his knees, and then like a spider just like he's like out of the room immediately.
See, that's why he doesn't walk on his own yet, because he can get from A to B so much faster the other way.
I was imagining him in like a darkened hallway coming at you with that pizza cutter.
Well, when we were out somewhere, some other parents were watching him. He was crawling down the floor of the brewery, and he was just smack, 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 smack with his hands as he crawled, and just... They were like, I love how he just slaps his hands down. I'm like, you gotta get more traction that way. Helps him go faster.
It does. Was it him or Tali that had the block that they were holding something, so every time they walked it was like he had like a peg leg is what it sounded like when they were crawling.
It could have been either one or both, because Walker absolutely... Oh, it might have been Walker. He had that like sugarcane wooden toy.
Yeah.
He carries toys with him. That's why it took him so long to crawl on all fours as opposed to belly crawling, because it's easier to hold on to a toy and belly crawl than regular crawl.
Boy.
All right.
That was some fun facts. Fun stuff. By the way, I figured out what I did is I shifted all of my dates down
a date.
Sorry. Well, not on March 27th. On April 22nd, the body of 45-year-old Marta Rybenko was discovered.
Way out of victimology range here.
Yes, and she is his oldest victim. She was also described in some texts as a sex worker. In other texts, she was described as someone with, how did they put it? Like a...
Loose morals?
Oh, it was something like I wish I had written it down. It was like disturbed sexual history or something. And I was like, okay, calm down.
She's a woman with sexual desires.
I
Therefore, she's depraved.
Calm down. So she's discovered her vagina, bladder, and uterus were all removed, but her eyes were left alone, of course. Police brought in a suspect who they had observed bringing women into a wooded area near where Marta had been found, and getting them drunk and then essentially raping them. He got them drunk enough to be essentially unconscious and then was having sex with them. And this guy's name is Nikolai Byskorski. And they coerced a confession out of him. He confessed to killing Lyudmila and Marta. But then they tested his blood, and he had type O. And so police were like, oh, never mind.
You're just a rapist. You can go.
Never mind. Carry on with your forest exploits.
Drunken shenanigans.
I know. Then on July 5th, police find 11-year-old Svetlana Petrosyan. She had been stabbed to death. And 3 weeks later, on July 27th, police find the body of her mother, 32-year-old Tatiana Petrosyan, about half a mile away. They were killed on the same day, May 25th. Tatiana was bludgeoned to death, and police didn't immediately connect the two of them because there was 3 weeks in between finding their bodies, and because it took a long time for them to identify the bodies. And Tatiana had apparently been a former sexual partner of Andrei's. And at this point, bodies are like turning up faster than police can identify them. This is like, I have to imagine, just like an awful summer. So in between... Also,
she's 32 with an 11-year-old. Can you imagine having an 11-year-old right now?
No, I cannot.
Me either. Can barely imagine the 1-year-old.
So in between finding Svetlana and Tatiana, they found the body of 19-year-old Anna Lemesheva. She was found about half a mile from a train station. Her eyes were mutilated, her nipples and uterus had been removed, and she had disappeared 6 days earlier than when she had been found. So she was found July 25th. She had disappeared like a week before. So some of these, it's interesting, like some of these they're finding pretty soon after they have been killed, and some of them they're finding months afterwards.
Well, like you said, it's a lot of work to figure out what to do with these bodies.
Yeah, it's true.
So he's probably, having some better luck with disposal than others. Still figuring out what works.
This is true. Also, I hate to be just like a regular, like, laborer at this time, because, those are the people who are just finding these bodies. Just like someone working in the field.
Why do you think I don't jog?
Don't job.
No, jog.
Oh, jog. Why do you think I don't job?
I don't jog.
I was like, I don't know. You got a kid. Same, yeah. So you don't find those mannequins. Okay. On August 3rd, Natalia Golosovskaya. She's 16. She was found near where Marta had been discovered. Her body was also mutilated, and leaves had been stuffed in her mouth. And she had only been dead for a day when she was found.
That's interesting, because apparently she was killed on August 2nd, but found on July 26th.
Get out of here. The rest of my slides will be in order. It's just this one. 1984 was chaotic for me. On August 10th, Lyudmila Alexeyeva, 17, was found near Rostov's city beach. This is the quote they gave me about her. She was a studious young woman with no known bad habits. Therefore, she shouldn't have been killed like the rest of them.
The rest of them were asking for it.
Yeah, I know. Like, everyone else, they were like, oh, she drank. Oh, she was known to have sex with boys. And then we get to Lyudmila, and they're like, oh, she didn't have any bad habits. And Lyudmila had only been dead for a few days when they found her. On August 12th, workers in a cornfield found the body of Dmitry Ilarinov, who was 13. He had a fractured skull. He had been castrated, and he had been dead for about a month. And so they're finding bodies like every few days at this point, which again, just has to be terrible. So while police are trying to keep up with this near constant string of bodies, Andrei, who has taken a job as a department head at a factory, goes on a business trip to Uzbekistan. And while he's there,
all the murders here stop.
Shortly. But while he's there, he kills and decapitates...
Oh, that's new.
I know. His second Jane Doe. And then he kills an 11-year-old girl named Akmarul Seydalyeva, who is an Armenian girl who had run away from home. And I don't know when they were found, because the Uzbekistan police obviously were the ones finding them, which must have been horrible for them. Anyways, Back in Russia, August 26th is the next time police are, just having the nicest day. And they find a badly decomposed body near a campsite outside of Rostov. It took a really long time for them to identify this one, but it will turn out to be 22-year-old Yelena Bakulina, and she had been dead for 2 months. Sorry that this is like the way that this episode is going. It's just me listing victims. I promise it'll get to, like a point.
I hope you're going to have some stats for me at the end, like, total victims, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
1984 continued.
Yeah,
I knew that was going to be
it wouldn't fit on one slide.
Yeah.
I hope my dates are right this time. Okay. They're not right. Oh, no, this one's right.
I don't know. Hit the next one, too. Okay, we don't know the date.
Oh, yeah, okay. So those are my two Jane Does. My Jane Doe and the Armenian girl. Okay. Okay, I'm back on the right track. Okay. September 2nd. So the body of 11-year-old Alexander Chepel is found in a meadow. He had gone missing on August 28th. He had been disemboweled and castrated. And they did find some physical evidence on him. So all these other murders, they were not finding any physical evidence, except occasionally they were finding semen and like a footprint, maybe.
Yeah.
So on Alexander, they find a single graying hair that they determined to be from a man. They find a burn mark from a cigarette, which is awful, but it tells them that it's
the perpetrator smoked.
Smoker. And then they find scraps of clothes found nearby that did not come from Alexander. So police are getting really desperate, and there's a lot of pressure to make an arrest. Also, Alexander came from like a nice home. I think his dad was like, I don't know, like a good communist, like a nice member of the Communist Party or something. So
grand old comrade.
Yeah. So pressed for a possible profile of their killer, this is what police come up with.
Oh Lord.
Tell me of what you remember of Andrei. A male between 25 and 30, which Andrei is much older than that at this point.
But they found a gray hair.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. This is just completely wrong.
I'm not saying that, 25 to 35-year-old men can't have gray hair. Mm-hmm. They typically don't, and those that do don't typically have enough hair that if that's the one you're gonna find.
Well, remember when they thought that their killer was only killing women, they thought it was a homosexual man, so. AB blood type, which we know is wrong. Tall, well-built, and athletic. Which, if you remember, Andrei grew up starving.
Mm-hmm. So he's none of those things.
Mm-hmm. At least average intelligence and persuasive, which...
Isn't he... I go with the intelligence, but isn't he, very, painfully shy?
He's pretty awkward and shy, yeah.
So I wouldn't call him persuasive.
Mm-hmm. Working as a driver.
No.
And then they think he is living... about 30 miles north of Rostov, which I think at this point, Andrei is, living in that area. So they're not super off about the location, but everything else they have very wrong. They also begin to closely watch and patrol transit stations because this is where they believe a lot of victims are being taken from, which they are correct about that. On September 7th, the body of 24-year-old Irina Luchinskaya turns up. She has been dead for only a day. And then on September 9th, the body of 20-year-old Svetlana Sana is discovered, and she has been dead for several months.
The day after my birthday.
Happy birthday.
It was the day before.
Between. Yeah.
So,
In between. He took a break. Or there's a break.
Well, no, the police took a break in finding. They're September 7th, found a body. You know what? Let's just not look tomorrow so that we can celebrate Katie's birthday.
Future birthday.
She's not even been born yet.
Yeah. But we can.
We'll just reserve that in history.
Yeah. So, on September 13th, Major Alexander the emphasis is getting me. Okay. Alexander Zanosovsky, whatever. I better just say his name again, whatever. He is patrolling a Rostov bus station, and he observes who? Andrei, approaching a young woman, or approaching several young women, and starting conversations with them. So he had seen Andrei several weeks before being a little sketchy, and he had questioned him. And so he recognized him this time and was like,
That's that weird dude.
I'm going to keep my eye on this guy. So Zanovsky, that's how I say it. Whatever. Alexander, what we're going to call him.
Now, is he regular Alexander or is he the cool Alexander? Is it Alexander or is it Alexander?
Oh, it's Alexander. You're right.
That's my favorite spelling.
Alexander.
With the K and the no and the no E
the
before
no
the
E.
R.
Alexander. Maybe I'll call him the Major. That's probably better.
There you go.
So the
Sounds
Major,
even more badass, unless he's a total doofus and lets him go, but we'll see.
Well, okay. So the Major follows Andrei for a while, and he's watching him, and he's like, being kind of sketchy. And so eventually he confronts him, and he arrests him because he's like, you're being sketch. They arrest him, they search him, and they find him carrying a bunch of rope, a knife, and a jar of Vaseline. And so the Major is like, I'm positive that this is our serial killer. So they have him in custody. They search his home. They find nothing. They test his blood. Blood comes back A. And they're like, well, fuck. So
they should have tested his semen.
I know. So the lead investigator is like, it's not him. Just let him go. But the Major is like, let's check his background. Background check comes up like,
doesn't fit their profile really.
He's had these like complaints.
The incidences with the school.
In school. But he also has this like petty theft charge from a previous employer that has never been prosecuted. It was literally like, it was something where like, the way it was described is like, everyone kind of takes stuff from work and it's just kind of assumed that you do that.
Yeah, and like you take home some paper clips kind of a thing.
Yeah, but it was like more than paper clips. It was like linoleum or something. But
that's weird.
I know. But it was like everyone kind of does this and it's kind of everyone always looks the other way. But Andrei's employer was like very annoyed with him and was just looking for something to get him on. So they charged him with theft for taking home this stuff. But they never prosecuted it because they essentially said, quit or we will prosecute you.
Right.
So he had this charge, had never been prosecuted, and the Major's like, listen, the blood thing didn't check out. Let's just prosecute this thing, and maybe he'll talk while he's in jail. Like, maybe he knows something. So, Andrei gets arrested on September 13th of 1984.
Woohoo!
He's sentenced to 6 months in prison. He serves 3. And he gets out on December 12th. While he is in jail... Oh, sorry. Fun fact. The Major was later relieved of his duties related to Operation Forest Path for being, quote, overly zealous.
You mean a good cop?
No, overly zealous. Also, when they... So, they searched Andrei. They found the rope and the knife and the Vaseline. So they, like, took that from him, right? Because they take your stuff when they arrest you and they put you in jail. So, like, they took it and they're like, well, we'll give this to... We're just going to hand this over to, like, your wife while you're in jail. And so Feodosia, God bless her, she took that knife and she just put it back in her kitchen. All right. So while Andrei is in jail, Dr. Alexander Buchanovsky is called into the investigation. And Dr. Alexander Buchanovsky is like our...
Is he the hero?
Star.
Is he our unicorn?
He's kind of our unicorn.
And is he an Alexander or Alexander?
He's kind of both because it's with an X, but it's also without the E. So I don't know how you want to...
The K is still better.
I know.
See, it's in this instance that the lack of an X is sexy.
Oh, I like that. I'm gonna say he is our unicorn, but I'm gonna save the
hero for
for one of the victims. I want to make one of the victims a hero, and just because he does something kind of badass at the end.
I think they're all heroes.
They all are heroes. That's true. No. All right, so Dr. Buchanovsky is called in to come up with a better profile of the killer, because he's an actual doctor, and he comes up with this psychological profile. And this is only the first. He does 2, so this is the first one he comes up with.
Okay.
So he determines that this killer's crimes are caused by a sexual personality disorder.
All right.
The killer is a sadist who could only obtain sexual gratification by causing pain and suffering.
Yeah.
The killer is compulsive and would likely be depressed or irritable until he's able to satisfy the urge to kill. He likely suffered from erectile dysfunction.
Way to hit the nail on the head.
Unable to maintain a heterosexual relationship. Was not someone with intellectual disabilities, but rather someone who was intelligent enough to do minimal planning and avoid getting caught. Which, he hasn't gotten caught yet. Likely suffered from some kind of mental illness, but something like schizophrenia, possibly.
Yeah, not, developmentally delayed.
Yeah. And someone who had little to no social activity and no close friends. Which,
yeah, no.
Hello.
That sounds like our buddy for sure.
And meanwhile, Andrei's just sitting in prison. And no one's like, well, we don't know anyone like that. Never heard of him. All right. 1985. So, Andrei gets out of prison on December 12th. Mm-hmm. So, the first half of 1985 passes without any bodies. Although...
Because he killed all of them in the winter and they weren't found until the spring or summer.
You can take a drink, because police had guessed that the killer was more active in warmer months. On August 3rd, the body of 18-year-old Natalia Pokhdustova was found in the woods of Moscow near the airport. And then on August 28th, the body of 18-year-old Irina Gulyaeva was found near a bus station in Shakhty, which is back to where we started. Mm-hmm. So both women had their mouths stuffed with leaves, and on Irina, they found sweat that they determined came from someone with AB blood. They also found 2 threads under her fingernails, one blue and one red, and a gray hair between her fingers. And at this point, Andrei enters his cooling off period. And interestingly enough, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, explained his own cooling off period graciously. So he had a cooling off period that lasted for about 10 years. And he said that the urge to kill never went away, but he simply got too busy for a while. Which I'm like, wow, that is...
interesting.
And terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, your life just got too busy for you to, stop kidnapping and torturing your neighbors. I don't know that much about him, and I'm scared to find out. So this may have been what happened with Andrei, that he just got too busy, or his brush with jail might have spooked him, because he had gone 3.5 years without any suspicion, and he had probably grown really comfortable with the idea that he was
too good to get caught.
Yeah, not going to get caught. But for whatever reason, he didn't kill for the rest of 1985 and for all of 1986.
Okay.
So he was a nice cooling off period. And during this dormant time, Dr. Buchanovsky expanded on his psychological profile. And he's now calling the killer X. He's come up with a little nickname for him. And this is his, like, expanded profile.
Is it gonna get spooky?
It's, like, weird that he hasn't met Andrei yet. Okay, so according to Dr. Buchanovsky, who has not met Andrei, X was not just a sadist, but a necrosadist, someone who needed to see his victims die in order to achieve full sexual satisfaction. The way he killed was analogous to sexual intercourse, so he used the knife as a surrogate penis. He could sometimes achieve orgasm just from the sight of blood alone, but he sometimes needed to also masturbate, which is why semen was found on some of the victims, but not all of them. His theory for why the victim was cutting out or mutilating the eyes, either it was a fetish, which, I mean, knowing Andrei, whatever, a power move, or it could be that he didn't like the victims looking at him, or it could be the Russian folklore situation. He believed that the killer was cutting out the sexual organs of women because that was symbolic of the power that he had over them, and that he was cutting off the sexual organs of the boys because the sight of them, quote, blocked his own sexual arousal. Dr. Buchanovsky also studied weather patterns and dates of the killings, and he determined that changes in atmospheric pressure compounded with problems that X was experiencing in his social or personal life likely set him off.
Wow.
I know. I'm like, are you the only one doing work on this case?
Talk about under pressure.
Like, what are the police doing? So he also predicted...
He needs to go join the Criminal Minds team.
I know. I'm like, someone should have done a show about him. He also predicted that the killer was around 5'7", between 45 and 50 years old.
There we go.
Yeah. That he had a painful and isolated childhood with one or more abusive parents. That he lived in a one-room house and was forced to witness sexual acts at a young age because of it. That he likely had gotten used to putting up with a lot of ridicule from his peers and coworkers. That he could be married with a family, but likely had a wife that let him keep his own hours and demanded little of him sexually, and that he could not keep or maintain an erection. And most importantly, Buchanovsky predicted that X would not stop killing of his own volition. So Dr. Buchanovsky is like...
Dang.
I know, right? I'm like the one-room house, man?
I love the clips of Criminal Minds when they just, like, there's that one that's really popular of, like, they're in court and he's talking about the lawyer and is like, oh, you're a gambler. Your phone's been buzzing every, however many minutes, which is between horse races. And I'm just like, I would both love and hate to meet one of these people in real life and have them, like, profile me just from a glance or, like, just a few minutes in the same room as me and be like, what do you know about me?
I know.
Gypsy.
It's so... I need to find out, because, of course, the books I read were written several years ago, but Dr. Buchanovsky, as of the time of the books being written, was running, like, a... not like a school, but like he was basically like identifying like young people who were likely to become serial killers and like putting them in a study to like help them not become, or like, I don't know, studying them. I don't know. It was
basically an intervention type program to steer them from the path of potentially becoming a serial killer. Because monsters are made, not born, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, you can be born with, mental deficiencies. Like, you can be born with wires crossed.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you are for sure going to become a serial killer. You can be perfectly normal in the head and still, become, or, like maybe it's your background or your one-room house and your one or more abusive parent that leads you down that. Basically.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, we've said before, explain, not excuse.
Yeah.
Like, these things explain why this person did these things or became this kind of a person, but it doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
So, like, understanding, I think that's pretty cool, trying to identify. And as long as it's not Minority Report and they're arresting people before crimes actually happen, and they're instead identifying basically problem children or people and trying to actually direct them in a good, positive path to prevent things, then awesome.
I think it was, like, super controversial because I think he's even taken, like, maybe even, like, kids who have killed people, like, and is trying to, like, rehabilitate them. I need to look more into it and, like, I don't know, do a mini-sode on him or something.
Please do.
I know. Like, he's crazy interesting. There's a cool picture of him I'll find. He has, like, a cool, like, professional picture done.
It's not in the slideshow?
I know it's not in the slideshow. His picture, like, I'll find it afterwards because he just looks, like, so fucking fed up with everything. And I'm like, you deserve to.
I'm too smart for these assholes.
No. Okay. So, I'm giving you a break. We're going 87 through 89. So,
all right.
We're progressing. Okay. So, let me see if I got this right here. All right. So, we know that Andrei's first murder after his hiatus was a 12-year-old boy named Oleg Makarenkov. Okay.
Makarenkov.
Yes.
That's what I'd say.
So Oleg went to a boarding school for children with developmental delays, but he didn't like the school. And on May 16th of 1987, he was skipping school. Andrei saw him sitting at a train station in the town of Revda and lured him away with the promise of a homemade meal at his house. And after murdering him, Andrei scattered his clothes along the road, which I don't know why he did that.
To confuse people?
I guess. No one ever discovered Oleg's body. It was one of the bodies that Andrei had to show police after he was arrested for the final time. After Oleg, Andrei traveled to Ukraine, where on July 29th of 1987, he encountered another 12-year-old boy at a bus station whose name was Ivan Bilovetsky. He followed him after having a brief conversation with him about how he shouldn't be smoking, which, shut the fuck up, Andrei. And then he attacked him and killed him. When police found him, he had dirt stuffed in his mouth. And there was also a knife fragment found nearby. On September 15th of 1987, during another trip to Leningrad, he met 16-year-old Yuri Tereshonok. He lured him again with the promise of a meal and attacked him as soon as they got into the woods. And he is another one whose body was not discovered until Andrei showed police where it was. On April 6th, 1988, an unidentified woman, so Jane Doe number 3, was found by railroad workers in Rostov near the train station. She had been bludgeoned to death and stabbed, and her hands were tied behind her back. Her nose was cut off, but her eyes and her genitals were not mutilated. So, again, just chaotic. Police found it really out of character that she was found out in the open and not in the woods. And photos and fingerprints and descriptions were sent out, but her identity could not ever be figured out. On May 16th, 1988, the body of 9-year-old Alexei
Voronko?
Thank you. This is also why I have a visual to help me with the names. Voronko was found near a train station in Ukraine. His body was mutilated in the normal manner. Police were able to talk to his friend who had seen him walking towards the woods with a man. So his friend described the man that he saw him with as a dyadya, which is a word for uncle, which is how they would describe any middle-aged man.
Right.
This is, again, where this is like throwing police off, because this child describes a well-built, athletic man with a wispy mustache and a mouthful of gold teeth, carrying a sports bag. Before you ask, no, Andrei did not have any gold teeth. I have no idea why the child said this. Police were, like, very excited because...
Also, when you're 9, all adults look big and strong.
Yeah, and, like...
So when he says well-built, like...
Yeah, no. And when I was 9, I don't know how I would tell the difference between, like, a thin adult or, like... I don't know, like a muscular, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know, is it Dwayne The Rock Johnson or is it a regular adult? But because he said a mouthful of gold teeth.
Yeah, there's like normal, morbidly obese, and Muscles McGee.
Yeah.
Like that's the 3 adult body type.
Yeah. For a child. Yeah. So police got really excited and thought that they could they're like, oh, great, this, like, extremely interesting characteristic. So they, like, contacted all these dentists, and that lead went nowhere because it wasn't true. Meanwhile, at the end of 1988, the Ministry of Health in Moscow had finally made the distinction between secretors and non-secretors, and they had sent a letter to Soviet law enforcement basically saying that they couldn't reliably determine blood type by semen anymore. So they're finally like,
okay, back to square one on this semen then. Awesome.
Stop assuming that this person has AB blood type because you don't know that. Do you have any other cute stories real quick?
No. I just want to power through this.
Okay,
this
sorry.
Is such a bummer.
I know. On March...
I really hate that this has just been a string of little boys, too.
I know.
I mean, I hate it for any of the victims, but it's just...
I
have my own little boy.
I know.
It just seemed like it was a lot back to back.
I know. It is. On March 15th of 1989, police found the dismembered body of 16-year-old Tatiana Ryzhova, wrapped up in her own clothing and stuffed in pipes that ran along a railroad track in Shakhty. Andrei had actually killed her inside his daughter's old apartment 9 days earlier, and because he usually killed his victims in the woods and just left them there, and this time he is in an apartment, and he didn't know how to get her body out, he cut the body up to make it easier to move. Tatiana had left home on January 11th as a runaway, and her mother had been looking for her ever since. Ooh. On April 10th of 1989, lumbermen found the body of 16-year-old Yevgeny Muratov in the woods near a train station in Shakhty. He had been missing since the summer of 1988. His body was badly decomposed, but investigators were still able to identify the MO of the killer. On July 15th of 1989, a taxi driver in Rostov found the decomposing body of 8-year-old Alexander Dyakonov. He had been reported missing by his parents on May 11th. He appeared to have been taken from the street, not from a train or bus station, and police feared that the killer was catching on to their efforts of patrolling, like, transit stations. And then in late August of 1989, Helena Varga, who is 19, was found in a wooded area 30 miles north of Rostov, far away from any transit station. Her body had been mutilated, but the killer's pattern was beginning to change. So he's like now staying far away from transit stations. On August 23rd, The body of 10-year-old Alexei Moiseev was discovered. He had been killed months earlier. And then on August 28th of 1989, 10-year-old Alexei Kolbatov was reported missing from his home in Shakhty, and his body was found only after Andrei's arrest. Okay, I'm going to tell you 1990 is the final year. So we are in the final stretch. Okay, so on January 14th, Andrei Kravchenko, 11, disappeared from the streets.
It's really weird how he's made a very clear switch to little boys versus
it's
little girls and young women.
Very strange.
Well, one of the things from Dr. Badass's profile, especially the second one, said unable to really have a heterosexual relationship. And so, like, yeah, sure, he's married, but kind of only in name.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't seem like, especially now, since he's so busy out murdering people, they probably don't have much of a relationship. You mentioned that she was complaining that he wasn't around a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just remembering that tidbit about not maintaining a heterosexual relationship and also seeing the kind of shift in victimology. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think most of the male victims have all been, like, sexually assaulted also.
I mean, I'm assuming, since obviously all of these murders are sexual in nature, I'm assuming sexual assault for all of them. Unfortunately, there's that whole using a knife as a surrogate penis thing that makes it even worse.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. January 14th of 1990 is when Andrei Kravchenko disappeared.
Weird to kill someone with your own name.
I know. He probably didn't care about names, though. So his body was found nearly a month later on February 19th, 1990 in the woods near where he had gone missing. On March 7th of 1990, 10-year-old Yaroslav Makarov disappeared from a park near a Rostov train station. His body was found 3 days later on March 10th. His tongue, among other things, had been removed. On July 30th of 1990, Ivan Fomin, who was 11, was found 30 miles from Rostov on a municipal beach. He was about a mile from the nearest train station. He was literally found, there was, tall grass near the beach. And that's where he was apparently killed and left. And he was just yards away from the crowded beaches. And so police described this area as the grass was tall enough that people would go there and kind of crouch down and change clothes. So it provided you some privacy, but they were
if there's still enough people around, if he was screaming or struggling or anything, they were there should have been a commotion to draw.
It's that's absurd that someone would be brash enough to kill that close to a crowded beach.
Well, isn't that kind of a common thing, too, that after a cooling off period, a lot of serial killers will come back, even more zealous than before.
Yeah.
And, they'll be more essentially rabid and less cautious.
Yeah, he's getting more reckless, kind of. So the fact that more bodies are showing up in rural areas prompted police to try a new tactic. So they stationed uniformed police officers at the crowded, busy transit stations in town because they had been doing surveillance there the whole time, but it was largely plainclothes officers. But now they're going to put uniformed officers there and hope that this visible police presence in busier stations would kind of prompt the killer to more isolated, less busy rural stations where they would have plainclothes, undercover officers. So,
July 30th.
July 30th, Viktor Petrov, who was 13, went missing from a Rostov train station, and his body was found on July 28th. I'm sorry. There's too many of them. Okay, so after Ivan, who was the one who was killed by the beach, police make this surveillance plan. But before the plan got off the ground, 2 more bodies are discovered. On August 24th, the body of 31-year-old Lyubova Zuyeva was found near a rural station.
Shelton's birthday.
Oh, great. Mm-hmm. But she had been killed in April, so they're like, okay, this is before our plan. Mm-hmm. And then on October 30th, the body of 16-year-old Vadim Gromov was found near one of the rural train stations that the police planned on targeting. Vadim was killed only a few weeks before being found, and the discovery of his body was a particular embarrassment for the police team because they were like, we're literally about to...
Yeah, this was part of our plan, and he beat us to it.
And then the same day that Vadim's body was discovered, police learned that another boy, 16-year-old Viktor Tishenko, had gone missing after visiting the Shakhty train station. Police ordered a search of the nearby woods, and unfortunately, Viktor's body was found on November 3rd. The scene of the crime showed evidence of a struggle. Viktor was the largest of all of the male victims. Viktor is who I'm going to call our hero of the story.
Go Viktor.
So just remember, there's a struggle. Mm-hmm. At the Shakhty train station, the ticket seller was able to tell police that she remembered seeing Viktor and a middle-aged man standing behind him wearing glasses. And her daughter also remembered the man being at the station a week earlier talking to a young boy who had gotten up suddenly and run away. So we're like, okay. So surveillance plan is now in place. And then on November 13th, 1990, the body of 22-year-old Svetlana Korostik was found near one of the train stations that was under surveillance. So she was killed on November 6th. She had disappeared from one of the train stations where police were stationed, but they didn't have any reports of men leaving the train with a woman. Mm-hmm. So, lead investigator, whose name is Fedosov, looked into the surveillance team who was at the station because he's like big mad now.
How did this guy get by us?
So
we had a plan.
So he found out that a bunch of reports had yet to be filed. I think it was like a holiday for them or something. And basically these reports were they were stopping men and saying like, what's your name? Show me your papers. They would write a report and, or like, what are you doing here? Where are you going? And they just hadn't filed the reports yet. So Fedosov is looking through these reports and he comes across the name Andrei Chikatilo. And he's like,
I remember that from earlier in the investigation files.
Yeah, this seems kind of familiar. So, this is so... Okay. So Andrei had been stopped by the surveillance team after he was seen coming out of the woods approaching the train station. He had grass and dirt stains on his clothes and what appeared to be a partially washed away blood stain on his face and a severely injured finger. Fedosov called another officer, Barakov, who had been involved in Andrei's previous arrest, and they both agreed that Andrei should be put under close surveillance. Also, once they had someone to focus on, all of the pieces kind of fit together. They're like looking into Andrei's background, where he had lived, the kinds of jobs that he had, and they're like oh yeah,
fits the profile that we've got. Interesting.
And they felt that because he hadn't confessed in 1984 when they first had placed him under arrest, that they would need to catch him in the act, which I'm like, that is very...
You held Yuri under an obvious false confession.
I know, I'm like, can you coerce a confession out of him? Like, of anyone to coerce a confession out of...
I mean, they held Yuri for what, 6 months?
I know, for like a... Yeah. And I'm like, that's a very risky plan that you're gonna, like, catch him in the act and also...
You're risking other people's lives.
Yeah, like, are you sure that you're gonna get there in time before someone gets murdered? Okay. So, they follow him for several days, but he doesn't do anything illegal. And then on November 20th, they're like, whatever, we just need to arrest him. And so they do. They just catch him in the street one day and they arrest him without incident. So he gets brought in. He denies any involvement, of course. When given the opportunity to write a statement, he writes several incoherent, rambling essays about his troubled childhood, or like sometimes he would write about his sexual depravity in general. Like that's what he was confessing to. Like he has a like,
yes, I'm a deviant.
Yeah. But he would like not mention murder. Like one of the times he confessed to like the assaults like at the schools or whatever. But that was it. And he was like, "Oh, I got that off my chest." And it's like, oh, dude,
that's not what we're here for. Thank you for confessing, but not what we're after.
He explained that the knife that they had found him carrying, he was like, "Oh, I carry that for everyday needs, like cutting sausage." So he had blood, semen, and saliva samples taken. Blood came back type A. Semen came back type AB. So they're like, oh, okay, cool. This all makes sense. His wounded finger was examined, and it was determined to be from a human bite. And so they think Viktor Tishenko had bitten him in his struggle in the woods.
Were they able to do any kind of dental impressions or anything to confirm?
I don't know, because I found that like little blurb and where it was sourced. So like there was like a blurb on Wikipedia, and I like followed the little source to my like book, and then it didn't expand. It didn't expand.
Okay.
But I'm saying that Viktor for sure bit him, definitely broke the bone, and he didn't go to a doctor for it. And I hope his finger fell off in the process. But they still needed a confession from him. So eventually they brought in Dr. Buchanovsky.
Yay, Dr. Badass.
Yeah. So they let him go talk to Andrei alone. He goes in there. He establishes himself as like a sympathetic ear. And he's like, let me show you what I wrote about you. And he basically is able to show Andrei, like, I understood you before I even met you.
Right.
And then Andrei confesses everything to Dr. Buchanovsky.
Dr. Badass.
I know! I'm like, oh, thank goodness. So, police had 36 murders that they were accusing Andrei of. And in the end, he confessed to 56 murders. I know.
So how many was on our slideshow today?
56, I think.
Okay.
Or 53, maybe?
Okay.
So some of the questions that he answered in his confessions...
I guess there might have been... Because you said there was a couple that he actually had to lead police to the bodies.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming there's probably some that bodies may never have been found that he either doesn't remember where they were or have been carried by scavengers, or it's been too long and he probably didn't remember, I guess, victims' names.
Yeah. There are a couple, too, that he, like, recanted after he confessed to them. So, I don't know.
I don't believe it.
A couple of the questions that he answered, he did say... that he was initially mutilating the eyes because he believed the Russian folklore about the retina. But after some time, he stopped believing it. And so he stopped mutilating the eyes. So there's that. There have been questions throughout as to why he was taking, like, body parts. A lot of people thought he was eating them. And he had been, like, accused of cannibalism. He confessed to tasting the blood of some of his victims and chewing on some of the body parts and swallowing other parts. But in general, he said that he was not eating them.
I believe it.
Yeah.
He tried a few things, but it didn't do anything for him. I'll believe that.
Yeah. He told police that he got really good at avoiding blood while killing, even though...
I thought part of the sadism thing.
He got good at avoiding blood getting on him.
Oh, okay.
So even though he was, he like needed blood to like get off. But this is how he was able to like just kill victims and like walk away and like get back on the bus and just go back. Yeah. On August 20th of 1991, Andrei was transferred to the Serbsky Institute in Moscow to undergo a psychiatric evaluation, which, I'll just get my little part in there because I have a smiley face for He was found to have borderline personality disorder with sadistic features. They also found lesions on his brain caused by prenatal brain damage. But nonetheless, they found him fit to stand trial, which there's a really interesting, they interviewed the doctor who determined this, and he basically said there's several criteria to come up with this, but
I mean, if he knows right from wrong,
it was essentially he knew right from wrong, he knew what he was doing was wrong, he was able to control himself, and he chose not to, which we said that at the very beginning was he slowly came to this realization that
he made a series of bad choices.
Yeah.
As I think what I remember we said. He was a good person who made bad choices.
Yeah.
And just got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. And then he made the decision that he was going to kill people because he wanted to be sexually satisfied. Because, again, I said this at the beginning, but he had it in his head that it was a need for him to be sexually satisfied, and he thought that this was the only way, even if that is the only way
for everyone to be sexually satisfied. But murder is not the way.
It's not. And if you think that that is the only way, sorry, maybe you just don't get to have that.
Murder of children.
I know. So his trial started on April 14th of 1992. He was charged with 53 counts of murder and 5 counts of sexual assault against minors from when he was a teacher. I'm glad that they tacked that on.
Yes. Because I don't care how many years it's been.
I know.
Those kids deserve official justice.
I'll just go ahead and show you my last slide, which is just... Those were all the pictures that we had. He was kept in an iron cage in the courtroom, which was specifically to protect him from the family members of the victims. It took 2 days for the judge to read the list of indictments against him. Each murder was discussed at length, which I cannot imagine what that must have been like for the families. Throughout the trial, the judge and Andrei had words with each other. The judge didn't like the dismissive way that Andrei would answer questions, or how he would deviate into talking about his difficult childhood. So the judge would basically say, shut up. And then Andrei would just, talk over him. And then Andrei would sometimes expose himself to the court and start singing, and he'd have to be removed.
This reminds me of, really awkward Shark Tank pitches. I don't know. There was an episode of Shark Tank Sheldon and I were watching the other day, and one of the sharks had already pulled out, but the pitch person kept trying to talk to him. He's like... I already, you've actually got an offer from this guy over here. I'm not interested. He's actually interested. Stop trying to talk to me. Okay, but Robert, this. And it's no. Yeah, that's what that reminds me of.
Yeah, he withdrew his confessions to 6 of the killings. But then he confessed to 4 more, which weren't included. I don't know. After closing arguments, Lyudmila Alexeyeva's brother threw a chunk of metal at Andrei, which hit him in the chest, which I love. And then when security tried to arrest him, the other families just wouldn't let them. This is my favorite little excerpt. And then on October 14th of 1992, Andrei Chikatilo was found guilty of 52 murders and 5 counts of sexual assault, and he was sentenced to death for each of those guilty verdicts. And on February 14th, Valentine's Day, of 1994, Andrei was put to death by a single gunshot and buried in an unmarked grave. And Alexander Kravchenko was posthumously pardoned for the 1978 murder of Yelena Zakhtynova, which he was the guy that was the very first murder. Remember they wrongfully convicted that one guy, and unfortunately executed him.
I forgot about that.
He was posthumously pardoned after Andrei was executed. But I know that concludes thankfully, the Butcher of Rostov. And that was the worst one I think I've ever done.
Yeah, we have a new Albert Fish.
I know. That, like... Ugh.
Andrei, and Albert, don't name your kid something that starts with A. Unless it's Alexander.
I know.
That one's okay.
You know my favorite thing about the name Alexander in Russia, or in Russian, is that a nickname for it is Sasha. I used to think when I, was like so in love with Russian and Russia, that I was going to marry a Russian and we'd have a little boy named Alexander and call him Sasha.
Shelton had a friend in college. His name was Sasha.
I love it. I love that name. I don't know why. Anyways, if you guys stuck around...
I'm glad we powered through and did not make that a 3-parter.
I know, me too. Part of me was like, really don't want to talk about this for a third week. Yeah. I want something happier and lighter. Oh, I didn't tell you. We found a prize for Josh.
Oh, good.
It was... Redbubble sent me another duplicate of my order. It was a second sweatshirt.
Nice.
I sent it to Josh.
Nice.
I was like, might be a little oversized for you, but if you want it,
all yours.
You can have it. I also sent him some stickers and one of my fake cockroaches. Nice. It was great. So.
And you signed my name to it too, right?
I stamped your name on it.
That's right. You have my name stamped.
We have stamps, so that's great. Anyways.
All right. Well, if you want to see pictures of Andrei's victims, because that's kind of, and also Dr. Badass, you said you're going to find a picture.
I'll find that while you're doing it.
You can check out our Facebook and Instagram at The Tales We Tell Podcast. If you want to see photos but don't do the social media, you should check out our website, thetaleswetellpodcast.com. And if you want to support us, get yourself some sweet, sweet swag and maybe some duplicates of your order. Especially anything featuring our awesome new logos of Sasquatch. You should go to Redbubble, search The Tales We Tell, and if you want to support us, don't need the stuff, maybe just, early access to episodes, commercial-free listening, some love notes and stickers from time to time, and also some fun bonus content every now and then, you should become a patron at patreon.com, search The Tales We Tell.
Yep.
And until next week, right?
Yep, we'll have something better next week, I promise.
More cheery.
There you go.
Oh, Dr. Badass. You are my hero.
That's his best picture. That'll be our that'll just be the picture
cover
for the
picture.
Yeah, that's how we all feel right now.
This fucking guy.
I know. All right, well, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.